All right, welcome everyone. It's June 2026, the 25th actually, and we're here for Satsang. And this week we're gonna have a little bit of fun. It's some review. I'm actually going over a chapter that we've done once before, so I think it might come off a little bit differently. I'm using it a little differently this time, but today's about the wisdom path. And I think the most important thing to understand here is that the way we do our regular life, when we try to migrate that into our seeking life, that the elements are just simply different. And so, intellect is the driver of typically our normal life. Intuition ends up being the driver of our inner life or our satsang life or our seeking life, however you want to label that. So I wanted to touch on that today because I think it's really important um, to recognize that when you step into this space and this flow, that there's just a different set of dynamics that are available and are operating, and paying attention to those is really an excellent thing to do. So the first one we're going to go through, these are both short, these are short ones from Ramesh. They're from pointers that we've been working with here the last few times. And it's called Analyzing Thought. And so this is when uh, Nisargadatta kind of moved into a place where he said, I really no longer want my folks uh, to ask the normal questions. He says, I don't want my questions at the body, at the level of the body mind. He says, such questions and problems concern one's behavior and conduct in this world, which hundreds of books have been written, and there are scores of gurus who pride themselves on their ability to deal with them. And later we're going to talk about the indirect approach, and that has a lot to do with exactly what he just said here. So at one session, when Maharaj invited questions, as usual, uh, a visitor asked a question which immediately brought a warm answering smile from him, signifying that the question was well taken and appropriate. The visitor said, Maharaj has often said that anyone wanting to be awakened must eschew thought. And yet, and yet all thought cannot surely mean conceptualizing, which one supposes is what to be avoided. For instance, Maharaj answers to questions are generally so appropriate and yet so spontaneous, it might seem that there is no thought behind them. And yet some thought must surely be the basis of those answers. Maharaj said there's a deed. This is the piece of wisdom we're going to work with today now. The difference in thoughts. There is indeed a great difference between thoughts and thoughts. Thoughts which form daydreaming or thoughts of regret about the events of the past or thoughts of fear and worry and anticipation regarding the future are surely much different from thoughts which spring up spontaneously from the depth of one's psyche. What what one might call thoughts that do not need any argument and interpretation by the mind. The former are to be ignored and avoided, and the latter are incapable of being ignored or avoided because they are essentially spontaneous and immediate and basically non-conceptual. Now remember, when he says they're to be ignored and avoided, what he's saying is that they're to be watched. So he's certainly not asking someone to become active in ignoring or avoiding. That's actually something the I would do. So now you have the mind basically talking to the mind about avoiding the mind's thoughts. Right. So that's not where you want to be. Where you want to be is simply watching the kinds of thoughts. So if you're dreaming about, having your future life look like a eternal picnic or something, then that's probably one you just simply watch, and it'll have a tendency to fade away. Maharaj then continued, the very first thought, I am, is surely a thought, but one that does not need any argument or confirmation from the mind. Indeed, as the basis of all further thought, it is the preconceptual thought. So think about that, a thought that's preconceptual. Now, the very source of mind. Here's where you need to recognize that within duality, that when we're talking about things, that we divide in order to speak about things. So when we start to talk about thought and feelings, it gets pretty messy, right? Because presence, for those that are built on a kinesthetic style of platform, there's always a sense to that, right? So that's where thought has a sense, or sense has a thought. You could go either way with that, but they always arise together, and they really can't be divided. So when we speak of it, recognize that we're speaking of things, and these are simply pointers. And think about it for a minute. The reason a pointer is always something that needs to be thrown away, because it's always a piece of something. Everything in duality is always a piece of something, pointers included. So the reason the pointers have to go eventually is that they're a piece of something. They point somewhere that's not a piece, but they are a piece of something. So when Ramana said, use a thorn to take the other thorn out, but then throw both thorns away, he was talking about that. When we talk about sitting on the I am, right, and then actually what's behind it, right? Well, all of that comes together. All of manifestation within duality happens all by itself. It's all a single piece. Right? So remember, as we talk about that, the wisdom in this is to see that we're dividing the kinds of thoughts. Ramesh used to use the term working mind and thinking mind. The thinking mind was the strategic mind of the ego, right? The working mind was what was needed in the moment, spontaneous thought. Living according to indirect or immediate thought in a divided dualistic mind is what most people do, because they have identified themselves with a pseudo entity that considers itself as the subject of all action. But direct or absolute thought is the process by which the absolute non-manifest manifests itself. Such thought is spontaneous, instantaneous, and therefore without the element of duration, which is an aspect of the split mind. Now, and you can watch that. When you see yourself ruminating, you can actually see that you're involved in duration. When a spontaneous thought arises, comes out of nowhere, arises, gone. It's as if it was never there. Well, the tracks that the birds leave when they fly through the sky. That's how spontaneous thought happens. Whenever there is duration, the thought must necessarily be an afterthought, interpreted phenomenally and dualistically. No spontaneous, non-dual, intuitive thought can arise unless the storm of conceptual thinking has subsided and the mind rests in a fasting state. And such thought obviously cannot know bondage. Instantaneous pure thought results in pure action without a tinge of knowledge of bondage, because no entity is involved. So he's touching on the bondage. When one starts to seek, it's because they feel like they're at bondage, because they're taking the I and they're seeking something to get it. And finally, the intuition is saying, there's nothing to get. There's no such thing as an object, basically acquiring an object, right? We identify it that way, we split it off and talk about it that way, but that really doesn't happen. Maharaj concluded his reply by saying, most religions are originally based on direct, pure thoughts. In the course of time, they degenerated into concepts. And on these concepts have been erected gradually an enormous amorphous structure made enchanting enough to attract and mislead millions of people. So Maya, which is this activity of individuality, right? The spontaneous thought, once spoken, right, can and usually gets migrated and becomes the building blocks of something entirely different. So when I see today's world of memes that we think are universally applicable, I often and almost always know that someone said something that was specifically applicable to a moment. most likely in response to a question. Osho was famous for this because everybody would say the guy, nothing ever fits with Osho. And that was because he was the master of balance. If you were leaning to the right, he told you to lean to the left. If you were leaning to the left, he told you to lean to the right. And if you think that leaning to the right and leaning to the left are both universal, then guess what? Those two things don't agree. But to the person leaning one way that's told to come back into balance, and the person leaning the other way, it makes entirely total sense. So just watch for the memes, right? Because a lot of times they're being presented as though there's some kind of universal wisdom, when in fact there's simply an application of a moment. And that is how most of the folks that we use as examples, Maharaj, Ramesh, Papaji, Osho, you pick your poison here. Most of those folks were very specific in terms of what they were delivering, and specific input for specific moments, and then those were picked up. So you can kind of take a look at Buddhism as a great example of that, where they don't really have a whole bunch of what he said left. It was simply writings by a bunch of folks that were turned into sutras. And now those sutras could, control millions and millions and millions of folks, because they've turned into a canon, if you will, of knowledge and rules that now need to be followed. So just remember that. That's why when you go to the I am, it's here and now. Right? The I am is always here and now. So when you look at when you look at seekers, those are folks that have said, there must be a way, there must be a way that we are here and we are built to be able to do our own mining. We don't need to depend on some outer source, right? That can happen all in and of ourselves. And that's the wisdom of the seeking paths, and certainly of Advaita. So here we go, an irreverent revelation. This is chapter 50, another one-page chapter in Ramesh's pointers. So Maharaj's daily routine includes bhajans and prayers 4 times a day. The first one being as early as 5:30 in the morning. During these bhajans, one sees him deeply absorbed in the verses that are chanted. Until recently, he used to even sing and dance with great abandon. Now, of course, he's not strong enough to do so. Remember, these were happening, a lot of these were happening after Maharaj had contracted cancer, and so he was starting to get weak. At one of the sessions, a visitor said to him, "Maharaj, you may be a perfect jnani, but when I see you singing bhajans with such emotion, I feel happy that devotion still clings to you very firmly." Maharaj answered promptly, "Everything has its place in the world as well as in our daily routine. The important thing is to understand the position as it really is, to have the right perspective. Devotion and reverence are all right so long as recognizes them for what they are, i.e., effectivity, and to that extent, bondage." So he's just saying that when you take on devotional practices, right, and practices of reverence, normally in the beginning you take them on as an I. And so they get basically wound into your behavior as an activity of the I. And all he's saying that as long as they are wound in that way, to that extent they are a bondage. And when one sees something for what it is, it loses its force. But if one gets involved in it, the bondage gets stronger and stronger. Now notice, when he gets involved, takes delivery as an I. But if one simply sees through it, no problem. All feelings, emotions, love, devotion, etc., are based on duality. So now, when he says that, you're coming from the outside in, right? But in an apperceptive state, or when you're simply meditating or watching, you're going to notice that these things come from the inside out. And he's not talking about that. He's just talking about how the emotions and the feelings are the ornaments for the Christmas tree of the ego. That's what he's after. Right? So that doesn't go away. A lot of Advaitins, I think, believe it does. Advaitins are often claimed to be kind of the driest version of seekers. But the reality is, it's interesting that Ramesh and well, most of the folks we hang around, we're very human, uh, very tangibly emotional folks. So, um, but the intellectuals like places where emotion's not part of the action. So Advaita, it can serve that purpose. Right, here we go. Um, so long as these feelings continue to dominate one outlook, duality will continue to have a firm hold, and the real holiness, wholeness, unicity will be out of reach. The whole position is so obvious and simple that one cannot but laugh and even be apparently irreverent when one looks at the fantastic superstructure of superstition and mystery that has been built on and around the basic simplicity that truth is. Do understand how simple and direct this is. I, in temporality, am total awareness without being aware of awareness, total subjectivity without the slightest touch of objectivity. I manifest through consciousness, through duality by means of subject and object, though the concepts of space and time and the range of interdependent opposites, without which manifestation and objectification would not be possible. All manifestation is my expression, my mirrorization, in which I manifest as each sentient being. This object, this sentient being, appears to function and considers itself erroneously as the subject. But I am only the subjectivity, and all functioning in the manifested world is my objectivization and consciousness, which indeed I am. All phenomenal objects, aspects of what I am, become sensorially perceptible only when they are extended into what I manifest as space and measured into what I manifest as time. Again, therefore, the simple and obvious truth, this here now. All manifestation sensorially perceived is not different from what I am in unicity. And of course, every sentient object can say this. Once this simple position is clearly understood, so I am not what it is that I'm observing. So in the witnessing and the observation of what it is that's being observed, there's a recognition that I am not that specifically. And what he's saying is, it's simply seeing that you are all of that. There are no seams, right? And once that's seen, you may do what you like going through the span of life that's been allotted to you. Indulge yourself, if you like, in devotion and reverence, singing bhajans, but understand the false is false. Understand that there is nothing religious or reverential about this process of manifestation. That's what devotion and reverence gets you into a lot of time, is that this is really a special thing. Right? Special is a term reserved for egoic. Because manifestation is simply occurs spontaneously, in which you as an individual entity are in no way concerned. So that's that little piece. So the irreverent revelation is that one can engage. When I was with Osho, Tantra was a big piece of the essence that he liked to teach. And that was a natural place for the Allen character to embrace, both as a belief that the Allen character was an individual, and later the embrace has not been left behind. When we got on, everybody wasn't here, but Michael was saying that his wife's out of town and she doesn't let him have ice cream, so he had ice cream today. And I followed on with the fact that when my wife last left, I was able to go buy all the corn dogs I wanted. You know, the kind you throw in the microwave and they dial up for 2 or 3 minutes and you can just eat them with mustard all you like. You know, well, My wife, when she came back, wasn't really highly approving of that as a diet. But the tantric Allen believes that corn dogs are the main feast for a tantric style dude. That's how the Allen character looks at embracing life. So squeezing it like a lemon, right? I use that term a lot. That was Osho's term. Squeezing life like a lemon. So there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with being a corporate animal as long as one sees through that someone is there doing something. Right? That's all there is. Right. All right. So I just wanted to start out because those are really important pieces of wisdom. And I wanted to talk about intuition and the path of wisdom. So here's the piece. An old Indian story tells of a time when God gathered all the creation and announced a problem. The gift of wisdom needed to be hidden from human beings until they were ready to receive it. Once discovered, this wisdom would reveal their true place and manifestation and bring a peace that could not be disturbed. The hawk spoke first. Give it to me. I will fly to the moon and bury it there. God smiled. No, one day they'll go there and find it. The shark moved forward. I will carry it to the deepest part of the ocean. God again shook his head. They're going to find it there too. The buffalo stepped forward next. Great idea. I will hide it in our dung. No, said God. Eventually they will search there as well. Finally, the ancient mother arrived in the form of a mole. She did not possess eyes that could see outwardly, but she carried another kind of sight, the inner eye. Quietly, she said, place it in their intuition. They will never think to look there. And God replied, let it be so. So think about intuition and how we look at that and how we hold it. It's not necessarily the place, it's not the go-to place of everything that we teach. If you want to be the next billionaire, there's not a course on intuition that's in the curriculum. That's not what they teach you. They teach you a whole bunch of different things. So there's humor in this story, but there's also remarkable precision. The wisdom was hidden in the one place the intellect rarely searches. In fact, the intellect takes pride in demeaning intuition a lot of the times, not because it's inaccessible, because it's too close. The intellect always looks outward, towards objects, towards explanations, toward causes, toward systems, toward methods, and toward conclusions. The wisdom path begins when the attention turns in the opposite direction. Not toward another object, toward source itself. The world we inhabit is largely organized around intellect. This is not criticism. Intellect's a marvelous tool. Without it, we couldn't build bridges and perform surgery, write books, navigate ordinary life. The difficulty begins when the tool becomes a ruler. In other words, rules over, not a ruler you find on your desk. Intellect knows only one way to understand something. It divides. We were talking about that earlier, remember? It's always divided. So when we talk about pointers, it's been divided. Take any discipline. Medicine divides the body into systems. Psychology divides the mind into functions. Science divides nature into categories. Spirituality often divides the seeker into problems requiring correction. The process is always similar. Separate, analyze, interpret, conclude. The intellect is extraordinarily effective at understanding parts. In fact, within spiritual circles, this is often called the indirect method. One would think that moniker by itself might be a tell. But what intellect cannot grasp is wholeness. The moment something is divided for examination, it is no longer experienced as a whole. This is why the wisdom path often feels so foreign. It is not proceeding through analysis. It's proceeding through direct recognition. Many of us approach spirituality exactly as we approached everything else in life. We arrived with questions. We wanted methods. We wanted maps. We wanted progress reports. The onion became the perfect metaphor. How many of you have done your spiritual work by peeling the onion? Remove a layer, then another, then another. Find the problem, solve the problem, locate the blockage, dissolve the blockage. The intellect was simply continuing its preferred activity under spiritual branding. Yeah, they even have a capital for that. It's called Santa Monica, but I digress. But wisdom belongs to an entirely different order. And this is precisely what Maharaj addresses in chapter 37 of Pointers from Nisargadatta Maharaj. A visitor asks a remarkably perceptive question. You tell people to avoid thought, yet your responses arise instantly and appropriately. Surely some form of thought is operating. Are all thoughts to be abandoned? Maharaj's answer cuts directly through the confusion. There are thoughts and there are thoughts. The thoughts of regret, anticipation, fear, and memory, the endless commentary of the divided mind. These belong to the world of duration. One thought leading to another, one conclusion requiring another, one interpretation leaning on the next. This is the movement that most humans call thinking. It's funny, thinking is kind of a word that we place on a throne, if you will. And when you look at it, it's really just a series of separate pieces. Right? And so when we're thinking, what we're doing is we're mixing and matching, which isn't as glorious as the word called thinking. Thinking is, seems to connote something much nicer. But there's another order entirely. Thought arises spontaneously. Thought without effort, thought without deliberation, thought that appears complete in a single instant, thought without duration. Pause there for a moment. Without duration, that phrase contains an entire teaching. The intellect functions through time. Intuition does not. The intellect moves from A to B. Intuition simply appears. The intellect argues. Intuition knows. The intellect concludes. Intuition recognizes. So when I talked about there being a different way of a different terrain that one stood upon being in the wisdom path, right? Recognition, not analysis, right? In inner knowing, not arguing, right? The assembly of thoughts versus the appearance of whole thoughts, right? Different feel, different activity. That's what you're involved in. And in the watching, that's seeing. This is why Maharaj points to the first thought, I am. No one reasons their way into the I am. Right? No one deduces it. No one proves it. Simply is. Prior to philosophy, prior to religion, prior to doctrine, prior even to thought as we normally understand it, the I am is the first intuition, the first recognition, the first appearance of knowing before the mind begins constructing an explanation. Now, here's the thing. The I am, that's not yours individually. I am is the universal. I am is the universal. There's no individuals in the I am. This is where the wisdom path begins, not with complexity, with immediacy. The challenge is that we habitually approach this terrain through the same intellectual machinery that cannot reach it. A beginning surfer provides a perfect example. This is a really nice story. Listen to this. Those of you who are surfers, you'll quite enjoy this. When people first learn to surf, they naturally believe that success depends on technique, the proper board, the proper wax, the correct foot placement, the right timing, the right conditions. And initially, all of this matters. Technique has a value, framework has a value, instruction has a value. But eventually every surfer encounters a limitation. No amount of technical understanding produces flow. A surfer can know everything about surfing and still not experience surfing. At some point, something shifts, often through experience, sometimes through failure, sometimes through a mentor. The surfer begins to recognize that the ride is not being produced by the surfer alone. The wave is involved, the ocean is involved, the wind is involved, gravity is involved, the entire field participates. And the moment this is seen, a different quality appears. The ride becomes less managed, less forced, more whole. The surfer is no longer attempting to dominate the experience. The surfer is included within the experience. Many spend a lifetime chasing this moment. Why? Because it contains a glimpse of wisdom, the whole functioning as a whole. I think I've often talked about how the climbers at North Face spend all year long, going up and down the mountain. And yet, if you talk to them about 5 minutes a year, they experience wholeness as they crest that peak. And they climb the whole year for that 5 minutes. The whole point of what they're up to is for that 5 minutes of wholeness. The intellect cannot create that moment. It can only prepare the conditions in which it may appear. This is the transition from knowledge to wisdom, from management to participation, from control to inclusion, from thought with duration to thought without duration. Maharaj repeatedly points towards the necessity of what he calls the fasting mind. This phrase is often misunderstood. The fasting mind is not a blank mind. It's not a suppressed mind. It is not a mind successfully defeated in combat. It's simply a mind that has stopped insisting, stopped commenting, stopped evaluating, and stopped interpreting every appearance. The storm settles, and when the storm settles, something already present becomes visible, not newly created, not achieved, recognized. This leads naturally into chapter 50. What exactly is being recognized? Maharaj's answering is startling direct. I should quit using that word startlingly. I can't say it. The real I is total awareness without awareness of itself. Total subjectivity without the slightest touch of objectivity. The statement sounds complex until it is felt. Then it becomes simple. The awareness reading these words cannot become an object. It cannot stand outside itself and observe itself. It is the ground from which observing arises. Everything that appears does so within this awareness. The body, the mind, the world, the seeker, the search, the entire movement of manifestation. And here comes the irreverent revelation. There's nothing particularly sacred about this process. Manifestation happens, consciousness appears, thoughts arise, life unfolds spontaneously. The individual does not create it. The individual does not manage it. The individual does not direct it. The individual appears within it. This is why Maharaj often laughed. Right? Corn dogs and ice cream. The entire spiritual enterprise becomes strangely humorous once seen clearly. We spend years searching for what is already functioning, trying to become what we already are, years attempting to locate what has never been absent. The ancient mother understood this. The great religious traditions often began from exactly such direct recognitions, pure intuitions, immediate insights, thoughts without duration. Then generations arrived, interpretations accumulated, commentaries accumulated, institutions accumulated, complexity accumulated, and eventually the original direct perception became hidden beneath the structure built to preserve it. The indirect method had returned, and again humanity turns wisdom into knowledge. Again and again, wisdom waits patiently beneath knowledge, unchanged, available, immediate. This is why intuition is not a special gift possessed by the fortunate few. It is not mystical, it's not exotic, it's not rare. It's a natural mode of recognition available wherever, whenever a storm subsides. The obstacle is not deficiency, the obstacle is excess. Too much interpretation, too much commentary, too much duration, too much reliance on the divided mind. The movement of wisdom is therefore not accumulation, it's simplification, not acquisition, recognition, not becoming, being. The seeker often imagines that wisdom is hidden behind a door requiring extraordinary effort to open. The truth is simpler and more radical. The door never existed. The awareness looking for wisdom is the very wisdom being sought. This is why Maharaj's final invitation feels so relaxed. Live your life. Sing if singing happens, practice if practice happens, pray if prayer arises, meditate if meditation appears. Do what comes naturally. But understand none of these activities create what you are. They unfold within what you already are. The hawk searched distance, the shark searched depth, the buffalo searched obscurity, the mole pointed inward. The wisdom was never elsewhere. It was hidden in the one place the intellect consistently overlooks. Here, before thought, before duration, before the next conclusion, before the next question, present now exactly as it always has been. And when this is recognized, not understood conceptually, but recognized directly, the search relaxes. Not because something has been found, but because it becomes obvious that nothing was ever lost. So that's that piece. Now I'm going to add one last little piece to that. As you begin to see that, you will know this is your path. This is your path. You have found the mine of gold. And when the next person comes along and stops and says, you know what? That's not a mine of gold. Gold doesn't even look like that. The knowing for is already arisen, right? The intuition knows this is gold. This is the mine, right? So don't go 50 feet down and start up with something that doesn't look like a gold mine, claim that it is, and lose your way back to the gold mine that you've discovered. Once it arises, once that sense is there. When I first went to India, it's a funny story. I'm in India with thousands of people in an ashram, right? And the one thing that was really clear to me about being in the ashram in India was this was a place unlike anything I had ever seen, unlike anything I was ever likely to see again. A place dedicated to meditation, to healing, to whatever. You could go and you could meditate every day. You could sit in the gardens. You know, you could do all of that. So needless to say, those who know me know that this freight train jumped onto the super freeway to whatever the heck was going on. So I did groups and I meditated and that place was there. It was available. The gold mine was open. And then what happened? People were watching this. I don't know if they were alarmed or whatever, but pretty soon I had a whole group of people coming to me and they're going, Alan, you know, you really can't do it that way. You need to take a couple of weeks and go down to Goa. And I would look at them and I would say, I live in Corona del Mar. Like, I'm not lacking for beaches over here, right? Beaches is not what I'm looking for. I'm a Californian. I grew up on beaches. You know, this is the gold mine, right? And it used to just shock me that the folks that were sitting in the middle of the gold mine felt that you needed to take a break from it. You needed to go do some tourism, you know? And I always remember Osho saying, Hey, listen, if you want to do tourism, buy a postcard. And I never understood it until folks started to tell me to go to Goa when I was in the middle of this amazing place. And I was right. There came a time where the ashram kind of folded into a memory of what was, like most ashrams do when the guru is no longer there, right? And I always look back at that because people will say, "Hey, Alan, did you go to pick out the spot in India?" And I go, "Yeah, I didn't do that." Yeah. Did you do that? Did you meet? Yeah, I didn't do that. Well, what were you doing? Yeah, I was knee deep in the gold mine. I was meditating 2, 3 times a day. I was listening to Osho twice a day. You had to record. I could sit and eat my breakfast and listen to a recorded version of Satsang in the morning and have a live one at night. And I could meditate and go to groups in between. I could get up and be at the first meditation at 6 o'clock and 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 meditate, read. I could do every single day. One day looked like the next, always available. So all I'm saying is when the intuition rises and wisdom is looking at you in the face, don't let someone come along and say, "Hey, you know what you need is a beach trip." In fact, the Airbnb has some really nice 5-star spots right down on the water. There's no gold mines on the beach. Not one. Haven't found one yet there, just so you know. All right. Any comments?
What came up for me while I was listening to the reading of Maharaj and Ramesh, and then what you were talking about is that it seems like all of this was about attention. And the way that I was thinking about it was, if you look at the 8 limbs of yoga, the last two are dharana and then dhyana, right? So dharana is focus, and dhyana is the opening up of the focus, right? Which is what you were describing. So to me, what Maharaj, because I've experienced this myself, where the most meditation, the purpose is you focus on something because it takes you away from those kinds of thoughts that you were describing, right? Because the thoughts are just focusing on the thoughts, like the repetition you were talking about. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But what I've noticed, if you focus on the I am, it's the primordial sense. So it's easy to move beyond that thought into just like total spacious awareness. So that's why I was saying that I feel like what was being talked about was attention, because it's when you can just let the attention, like the idea, like attention itself is a thought. So when you let that go, it just becomes totally wide and everything's there.
Correct.
And that's when even the witness consciousness drops, because there's nothing left to witness,
Yeah.
because witnesses is just focusing.
And recognize that it sounds like I'm saying focus and pay attention.
Yeah.
All that's happening is that consciousness is planting the seed that says, right, in the living understanding, once you find it, stay there, because what you'll notice is what Gyan is talking about is that you're in the middle of it now. It's like the surfer who is in the middle of being surfed, right? Well, pretty soon there is no need to know you're in the gold mine, right? It just continues to happen and happen and happen. So it's just notice it, stay there, and then recognize that the staying there by itself is being handled by someone else, right? So even the last two pieces that Gyan is talking about in the yoga, right? Those become simply part of what is, right? They're taken on, they get expressed. It looks like they're separate parts or separate teachings, but then pretty soon they completely dissolve and go away. There's nothing left, that he said, there's nothing left to witness. So the instructions, right? The pointers get thrown away in the end, ultimately. Like people will come to me and they start to talk to me about they start to talk to me about how to divide terms, right? As though that were important. Right. And I'll go back and say, look, the only reason that we divide it up is so that it can land. I don't care if feelings are part of duality or the sense of presence could be called a feeling that's in the primordial space. I don't really care. It's all happening at the same time, right? But if we're going to talk about it, right, then we divide it up into parts and we point at that. But spending your life talking about what the difference is between consciousness at rest and consciousness in action is an entire waste of time. Right? It's useful when it lands. That's all it's good for. Because we throw it away anyway. Right? It's precious in the beginning, and in the end, it goes in the waste can. Because it's been superseded, transcended. It's gone to where Gyan is talking about. There's nothing left to witness. Once there's nothing left to witness, you don't have to worry about, leaving the ashram for 2 weeks. You're not going anywhere. So all of that then happens by itself. The same with surfing. No one who has ever surfed, right, and been in that flow ever needs to worry about finding out what it is to surf. That's happened. They can throw that away. Great comment. Thank you. Anything else? All right. It's going to be a short one today, but powerful. So take it, embrace it, watch again, read the pieces. They're 1 page each. Very simple. But it's in that simplicity that the wisdom lives. So we knocked that hour meditation out in 10 minutes, didn't we? Good job.
We sure did. Thanks, Alan.
No worries. No worries. All right. I love you all. It's been a great,
Thank you.
It's been a marvelous week. Thanks for coming. And we'll have something for next week, huh? I'll see
Sounds like a
everybody.
plan.
Okay, man.
See you guys.
Much love, everybody.
Much love.
See you later.